Hello and welcome to Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. This is a special pre-budget show where we are going to discuss expectations and suggestions for the Union Budget 2025-2026. India is on a growth path and India needs a lot of infrastructure. In fact, we are looking at investment of more than $150 billion in infrastructure. Access to finance is also an important issue. Of course, there are sectors like the farming sector, there are core sectors like the steel sector. We are going to discuss all of this and more, but I am not here to speak. We will listen for our panel of experts. Let me welcome Dr. Sasmit Patra. He is a member of parliament now for the second term from the Biju Janata Dal. He is the leader of the house for his party in the parliament. Also an expert on finance affairs because of his degree in finance and his involvement in the financial sector. Good to see you, Dr. Patra, and looking forward to some insights from you on trade and industry. We have with us Gopal Krishna Agarwal. He's a familiar face on the show. You all watch him as the national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party. He's an important voice on the economic affairs. His columns are widely read across all newspapers, so you read him every other day. And of course, a familiar face on TV. Good to see you, Dr. Gopal Krishna Agarwalji, and looking forward to some interesting insights from you. We have with us Rakesh Nangia. He's a chartered accountant and the chairman of Nangia Anderson India Private Limited. Good to see you, Mr. Nangia, and looking forward to some of your insights. At the outset, may I request Dr. Patra to give the opening comment, and then we'll go into detailed discussions. Over to you, Dr. Patra.
Thank you so much, Tarunji, for inviting me to this wonderful program, and many thanks to have Manya Shri Agrawalji and Manya Shri Nangiaji with us. Especially the Union Budget 2025-26 is going to be extremely crucial in terms of taking India forward and leapfrogging towards the $5 trillion economy. Having said that, there are 2 or 3 areas where probably Union Budget would be important. One is that when we look at the inflation today, and there is a need for rate cuts as well on the other side. Apart from that, there is a need to boost public expenditure. At the same point of time, there is a need to actually improve the savings in the banking system, as well as to also free some amount of liquidity into the market that would help the capital markets. When we come into the farm sector, there is a need to actually boost agriculture further, increase the productivity and also the crop diversification. On irrigation, there are certain needs that the budget needs to look at. In terms of the middle class, if we were to look at it, there is a lot of hope that probably taxation, direct taxes would again have some amount of impact. We would see some kind of moderation there. When we look at in terms of industrial productivity and production, that's an expected area where the industry is expecting some kind of stimulus support. Apart from that, there are a couple of other areas, like, for example, there has been a long-standing thought process of a direct tax code that it might come in terms of implementation. That is one. In terms of capital expenditure, CapEx, it's expected that this budget would provide some kind of an impetus on capital expenditure across, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector. In terms of support to key sectors like MSMEs, it is expected that MSMEs are not doing as fast or are not kind of, making those kind of inroads that are expected. Some kind of a stimulus for the MSME sector is expected. Green energy, that is something that is going to be very big. India has made huge commitments in the global order through the COP in terms of energy sufficiency that we would do and move out from the fossil to the non-fossil. So green energy is an area. Economic stabilization while ensuring GDP expansion. That is going to be another key area. Fiscal discipline. Some of the states are having fiscal discipline problems while some are doing well. How do we ensure fiscal discipline and not go more into an area where, I won't use the word populism, but surely certain programs are becoming too populistic than actually creating assets. How do we do that? Social welfare programs. So overall, there are several areas of the economy that we can really look at in terms of creating a more robust, a rainbow kind of budget, I must say, which kind of caters to all the sections of society. But the stimulus that is really expected for the economy is going to come from this budget, hopefully. So, as a parliamentarian, my expectations would be the bottom of the pyramid is to be taken care of, naturally so, through social welfare without being populistic, ensuring capital expenditure as well as capital asset creation. Industry needs to be taken care of, and not, there is a certain amount of requirement in the MSME, as I said. The middle class, the direct tax code, is it going to come? And there has been a little bit of talk about universal basic income. If you remember, Economic Survey a couple of years back had talked about UBI. That's again another convergence area that the government had been talking about. So all in all, it's going to be a very interesting budget that's going to come in. And if it is going to be ambitious, it's going to really push us onto that growth that we need to really probably up another 0.5% or more. That would help us to actually circumvent any global headwinds that might come our way, given the kind of recessionary trends that we see sometimes in Europe and a couple of places in South America. So given that, I think it's going to be an interesting budget, and I'm very hopeful it should come out well.
Thank you. Thank you for that opening comment. We will now go to Gopal Krishna Agarwal ji, his Chief Economic Spokesperson for the Bharatiya Janata Party, for his opening comment. Over to you, Mr. Gopal Krishna Agarwal.
Thank you, Tarunji, for this important discussion and inviting us. We heard Dr. Patraji, who elaborated on all the expected or the areas where the government has to work in this budget session, and it's a budget for the coming year. He has given a very elaborate opinion on all the important aspect, and we will also now have comments from Rakesh Nagyaji. What I would like to say in my opening comment is, and based on what eloquently Dr. Patra has said, that on the I have been participating in some of the deliberations which are taking place on the budget from the industries, from the professionals. MSME sectors have also approached me. Other areas have also come out to discuss about their expectations. Overall, economists and everybody is very clear that economy at this juncture, Indian economy is at a very potentially very good point where it has immense potential to grow at and become one of the, it is one of the fastest growing, but to become one of the big growth engine, not only for India, but for the world. But it will not come automatically. That is also very clear with the government. And on the prescriptions also, there is a quite consensus among all the stakeholders that inflation has to be checked, fiscal deficit has to be managed, then stimulus requirement is there. The government has to continuously go for mega expenditure on infrastructure for ease of living, ease of doing business. Then private capital formation is at a difficult situation because there is low demand in the economy. Middle class has been continuously expecting big support from the government, and there are counter demands also. Not these are the issues where there is a consensus, but there are conflicting stakeholders demand also. MSME have contacted me that government should not increase the custom duty, etc., because it creates increase in their raw material cost and they become uncompetitive at the global level. And we have to, if for increasing demand, we have to depend not only on domestic market, but export market also. And therefore, we have to integrate our industries, particularly MSME sector, to regional and global supply chain. For that, they have to become competitive and they need lower cost of raw materials. Cost of production is an important factor. At the same time, we are facing a big challenge from countries like China and other, where large industries, etc., are saying that we are facing dumping large scale dumping from these industries. So this balance, whether conflict is that whether government should go for free trade agreement, what is the future of multilateral trade agreement like RCEP or ASEAN, how government should work on that and how we should move forward. So these conflicting demand and stakeholders have to be matched. What I think is where economy is concerned, there is largely consensus among every stakeholder. The conflict is between the political narratives because my senior colleague Dr. Patra is also seen what is happening in the parliament and other debates. There is a conflict on the political side of where economy should go, how the government should move, how much important are reforms, where economists and industrialists and everybody agrees that we need reform and government is also committed to reform. Capex by public sector undertaking, all is going to take place. So the conflict is about reform, like labor reform, land reforms, how private capital has to be built up, the interest rate has to be lowered. So this is always economy is balancing conflict. So this narrative also, I have been talking to various people who are well versed with the economic parameters and ecosystem, that we have to build a consensus on economic front and not rise above political considerations. So whether welfareism, that freebies, all these debates will also be considered. But I am very sure that our government is strongly committed to boost economy, whether it is through PLI, infrastructure spending, and going for agriculture reforms or support of the middle class. I think some of the important issues now is creating more demand in the economy. For that, we have to put more money into the hands of the public. That can come through lowering of taxation for the middle class because corporate tax is already low. So GST has been doing good. Instead, in spite of lowering of the tax, the tax collection has been robust, but there are certain issues on the personal tax and corporate tax. But they are rising, but their scope of increase is limited because if the GDP doesn't grow, the corporate tax and other taxes uh, can stagnate. So government, if the government has to continue the amount of expenditure on infrastructure, which we have been doing about 11 lakh crore a year, which Tarun Nangia ji also said there's an ambitious plan on that. So for that, government will need resources. That resources can come from taxes, but taxes have to be kept low. More money has to be put into the hands of the middle class and other lower income group people. Employment generation is a big challenge. Manufacturing sector can bring this employment generation. It needs support. So the challenge is employment generation, balancing the uh, uh, export trade for MSME and large industries, and creating more money in the hands of middle class through lowering of taxation, etc. is important. And continue with the reforms and push for credit formation in the private sector, but that will come only through demand. So one thing I also would like to mention, underline here is that in addition to only depending upon domestic market, we have to integrate our economy to global markets and we have to increase our exports. So these are very clear that the government knows the problem and government is also committed that if what Prime Minister Modi ji has said that we want to achieve the status of a developed country or a global leadership by 2047, Viksit Bharat, or global leadership, it will not come unless we become an economic power. The world at present is looking towards India. Huge investment through FIIs, FDI is ready to come to India, but it will need labor, land reforms at the same time. It will also require that in India becomes a superpower in economic sense. If economy doesn't perform well, then the other areas of geopolitical importance for India will not be achieved. So this budget will clearly focus on economic growth, support those areas where issues are required, and it has been very well underlined by Dr. Patraji and other in the public domain. I think these are some of my
Opening comment.
comment, and I would say that the government is well versed with the challenges. It is not that the economy doesn't have challenges. Nobody will deny there are challenges, but how do you meet those challenges? How do you understand and know and acknowledge that challenges is important, and that we are prepared for.
Thank you for a very realistic and very pragmatic approach in your opening comment. Prime Minister Modi in Rajasthan summit said, reform, perform to transform. First, government will do reform, then industry will perform, and that's how the economy will transform. So this three-step mantra the PM has given. Now the challenge are that our manufacturing is 15 to 17% of our GDP. We have to increase it to 25% for job generation. Second, our deficit with China trade deficit has crossed $100 billion. So we are losing something like 8.5 lakh crore, maybe more. I think it's 116 billion dollars. So maybe 10 lakh crores we are losing every year in foreign exchange. The good news is we have a great surplus with United States of America. So the America is benefiting India a lot. We have, I think, more than 50 billion, big amount of surplus with America. I'll have to check the figures, but we have a surplus. So how this can be lessened and that relationship can be further increased, because America is a big consumer market. That also, we will have to see. But we will go to Mr. Rakesh Nangia, Chairman Nangia Anderson, for his opening comment.
Thank you, Tarun. My two experts have spoken in a full landscape, have given the complete landscape of the economy. Let me do a little bit of filling, actually, where I can fill it up. I think the challenge, if you see, I'm dividing the year into two parts, the first 6 months and another 6 months. If you see the first 6 months, our GDP of country went down to 6.7% in quarter 1, and in quarter 2, it was 5.4%. And this happened, if you see how it happened because of election uncertainty, which automatically led to the slowdown in the government spending, and then automatically there was a reduced manufacturing and subdued consumption. If you see this thing exactly happened in the economy in the first 2 quarters of the consumption. Now, with the things settling down, stability of the government coming down, we do expect, and even the government do anticipate, there should be a rebound in the second half spending, a rebound which is likely support because of elections coming in favor, stability coming there. There is a seasonal rural demand likely to spring up because the monsoons are good, basically, which will ultimately lead to the public expenditure and infrastructure spending. This will have a rolling and cascading effect where we can say oiling the machinery, which was getting slowed down. And surprisingly, there is not too much of tweaking downward trend in the GDP, which has been announced by the government. Actually, we are not expecting too much of a fall. World Bank is sticking to the target, saying that we are likely to cross or reach to the target of 7%, which they mentioned it. But there are certain challenges we need to know and understand, basically. One is the biggest is the inflationary pressure. India is a price-sensitive country. Even you would be surprised if there's a price increase by a few paisas or on daily consumption of few rupees, it has an effect on the whole country if you take it by numbers is there. So inflationary pressure, global economic headwinds is a very big challenge, which is going to put the challenge. And I can tell you one thing, the government will have to go through a very tightrope walk on the fiscal prudence and the economic growth and centric spending. This is where the government need to really put their heads in to see that how the economic growth takes place, how the spending continues to take place, how there's an increase in public expenditure and spending and more money in the pocket of the very important thing, which I can say that is the biggest challenge right now, is the geopolitical issues which are around the world and which are expanding. There's a tariff war which has been announced. How this tariff war will really affect the world at large, developing countries at large, is something we cannot ignore it. If you see, if you're going to do it's actually a word like tariff war. What happens if every country becomes looking inward? Today, you are not a question of inward. You have to see outward also. You're dependent on other economies. Does it lead to inflationary pressure? Does it lead to shortfall of key items actually? This is a very serious and economic change. A matter with the government need to really look into this. And rightly mentioned about the manufacturing part, 17% of GDP, right? Target 25% is a humongous task actually. And I tell you one thing, if you see the record of previous 7-10 years, it is going down slightly. And in last couple of years, in spite of PLI coming up as a very good move, it is just inching very slowly actually. Government is clearing, intention of the government is clear to boost manufacturing, to boost employment actually. But the way it is should have performed has not happened. And I think government will be spending a lot of energy to see that how the employment, GDP, and everything picks up. And this key will be the manufacturing is concerned. And right now, what you think? Inflation remains a very important part where the government needs to think about it. And very good positive statement, which was given by the Reserve Bank of India governor yesterday only. He mentioned about continuity. He mentioned about stability. And he mentioned about inclusive policy decision making. And such encouraging statement coming from the governor gives a lot of hope in the economy, actually. A lot of hope to the businessman. The government means business, government means growth, government means continuity, stability, consistency. So if I do all bunch of this thing, we have next 6 months are good, although we have actually 4 months now, doesn't that? We still do expect a good tax collection to take there. This year record has been very good. GST has not been very bad. It has been okay, but not too high, very high figures, but still not bad. This growth momentum is likely to accelerate. And there should be a tangible, visible change likely should happen in the next 4 months' time, so that we end with a reasonable fiscal deficit. A fiscal prudence is maintained also. And at the same time, current account deficit, India is anyway doing very well. So that's not a very key area of concern. So, on a nutshell, we expect a budget to take care of the people, the individuals. We don't have too much of tweaking left in the budget, except doing tweaking here, there, giving a filler, giving some incentive to certain class of people actually. But if we expect too much of changes to take place, it will take place in the code, the new code which is likely. That will be redemption law. But the budget for this year, taking that part out, should be more on the spending, encouraging spending, giving incentive, maybe do something to bring more PLI, something to bring more manufacturing, because it has a cascading effect on the economy.
Thank you. Thank you for that opening comment. I'll go to Dr. Patra. Dr. Patra, 3 things. First, agriculture, of course, their representatives have been having meetings in the finance ministry, but there are other core sectors like the steel sector, infrastructure. Do you think any special push needs to be given so that India continues to perform at the rate that it is performing, or gets an acceleration?
Tarunji, you talked about the steel sector. Let me weigh in on the steel sector primarily, because infrastructure, of course, has got several more dimensions to it. In the steel sector, I was doing a little bit of background and have been speaking on this also with you, apart from that, with various platforms, that the existing duty framework in the steel sector is skewed heavily against the Indian steel sector. So what's really happening is, right now, India imposes a basic customs duty of about 15% on the steel products. Now, what really happens is, under the free trade agreement, if you were to look at it, there are several countries like Japan, South Korea, and especially, the ASEAN countries, and primarily China, if you were to look at it, though they are not FTA at the moment. But what they do is they actually try to enter India at zero, almost reduced duties. Now, that is one of the reasons why you find that China and the FTA nations have started, I would very honestly say on China that it is literally dumping the steel like that we are having in India today. I mean, if you were to look at it in the first half of 2024-25 itself, the steel imports have surged to 5.51 million tons. So if that is going to be there and a significant portion of that coming from China is going to really flood the market, then you're going to have a real serious problem for your domestic manufacturing sector. So we are unable to protect them. The steel industry has been requesting that, no, at least you cut down the, I mean, you increase the import duty to a certain extent that it is protected. For example, up to 40% is the barrier in some of the other countries as well. But we have a basic minimum of 15%. So that is one. Second is in terms of border adjustment tax. Now, this has been something that Commerce and Industry Minister Shri Piyush Goyal ji has also been batting for. And I'm a stall votary for the border adjustment tax, because what it really does is it equalizes the cost by imposing additional levies on imports, which would otherwise, reflect the domestic taxes and the levies borne by Indian steel producers. So these are border adjustment tax would actually help, which would add about $40 to $50 per ton to the domestic steel cost, and thereby it would actually help to increase the level playing ground in the steel sector, both for the foreign as well as for the Indian players. But the challenges again is that whether the government is actually wanting to push or bite the bullet, I think the time is essential. It's not that the government has not been trying to do it. The Indian Steel Ministry has been trying to safeguard. Mr. Kumaraswamy has also spoken several times on it to how to protect the steel industry. But I believe that this budget has to really address this issue sooner than later, because otherwise what will happen, the export-import balance will get skewed. That is one. The domestic resilience will go down, because right now we have to protect about 10,000 steel consuming industries in the country, and especially the MSME sector, which cherishes the cheaper steel that is coming in, especially the stainless steel and the steel that really comes in from China, because it helps them, because it's almost 30% cheaper in many cases when you look at the stainless steel sector. But what it's going to really do is it's going to be a death knell for many of the small manufacturing sector steel industries in the country that are manufacturing it. And then it will also reduce our domestic competitiveness relating to the steel sector manufacturing. I think net, if I were to say, the steel industry needs to be protected. It's a core sector. It kickstarts many sectors like infrastructure you talked about. But if we don't do something now, leaving it for a year and two later, China is moving through Vietnam and many ASEAN countries to actually enter India. So when you prevent China, it actually goes through some of these ASEAN countries and comes through it from Vietnam, Cambodia. So we have to be very careful about how it's using these routes. And if we are not resilient enough to actually safeguard our steel sector, I think too little, too late, it will be a case.
Thank you for that strong argument, Dr. Patra. I'll go to Mr. Gopal Krishna Agarwal from the BJP for his comment on specific sector push that is required.
Thank you, Nandyaji. I think the debate has risen above the budget only for this year, but it is very good, because unless you understand the whole economic ecosystem, you are not able to come out with solutions in the short term and even in the long term. So it's very good that Nangyaji and Dr. Pataji has raised some important issues. I'll just in a brief put 3-4 points, which are, I think, very important. I think for as far as inflation is there, briefly, I'll take 2-3 points. Then I'll talk about the sector specific. Inflation is the responsibility of the central bank, and it has said that we will be able to manage the inflation within the range, and where inflation hurts the lower income group or lower middle class, there the government can come out with specific welfare schemes and other supportive systems. So I don't think inflation should become a hindrance to government policy making. Second thing that I would like to say here is, what is our thinking is that fiscal deficit cannot be a constraint to, because when we want a huge expenditure to be drive the economy for ease of doing business, for ease of living and creating demand in the economy, when private sector is not coming out with more investment, private capital formation is not taking place. If we over focus on fiscal deficit, then our policy, because ultimately economic policy is balancing these various parameters. So fiscal deficit has to be kept in mind, but it cannot be a constraint to the government spending and other things. This is also very clear. And the third point that Rakesh ji raised was also very important about geopolitics, and Dr. Patra also said about that when we talk about BRICS declaration, or when US President Trump said that we are starting a tariff war if any these countries take up some like this measure. So there are three important economic drivers or manager in the global arena: Russia, China, and US, and India is also part of it. But what I think is that the our interest, it aligns more with the US, because as Tarunji said that we have a deficit with China. China is considered to be our competitive, and we are considered to be beneficial of China plus one policy, that investment, if investment doesn't go to China, it will come to India. So our interest aligns more with Europe and Gulf countries and US countries. So we have to be very intelligently manage this geopolitical conversation and sidetrack, because should not get into the fight with US and China or Russia is getting. So we have to very intelligently not get into the targeted target of US, etc. And they are not going to hurt us unless. So I don't think in that also we will be able to manage. Earlier, there was a big demand that steel industry is getting hurt on various base metal, etc., because of dumping. So easiest thing is raise import duty, custom duty, countervailing duty, etc. Countervailing duty is fine. But then if we overdo with the import duty, the MSME sector, we saw how steel industries flourished. They had huge profits, all the state industries, but MSME sector became uncompetitive. And then the government had to, under pressure, reduce the import duty, which at point of time had increased. So this is very important lesson for us to see whether in the larger interest of employment generation, creating manufacturing sector ecosystem to increase its contribution to particularly MSME and small industries, etc., into our GDP, increase that to 25% to meet that target, and it is a employment generation areas also. We have to, I'm very clear that we cannot depend only on domestic demand. We have to depend upon global demand. Our economy has to integrate with regional and global supply chain. That can come from making our manufacturing sector, small businesses, etc., competitive at the global level. So this is also very clear. I also give an example why at times which solutions look very simple, they become very complicated. In the oil sector also we saw this kind of complication when government tried to control the domestic price through whether in oil, petrol, diesel, etc. What happened that a public sector undertaking, the government can do the price control through. It is not direct control, but it is that recommendatory way. But private sector then had a huge profit in exporting. They started not selling their product in the domestic market. Then to meet that challenge, the government had to put windfall tax on some of the companies. There was a huge hue and cry. So if you try to manage these things in only taking domestic market conditions, demand, etc., or domestic interest, because our economy is now very much integrated at the global. If we want to become the global leader, if we want to become the from the fifth largest economy to the third largest economy, we cannot ignore the global ecosystems or global parameters also. So to end, create my comment and keep it short, is that macroeconomic parameters have to be observed, but they cannot be the driving force for our economic requirement. They have to be kept in mind, but they are outcomes. We do not challenge the macroeconomic parameter with that. We will keep the fiscal deficit under control. We will keep the inflation under control at this level, or other parameters like this in liquidity, etc. So they are outcome of economic growth. So our focus has to be economic growth instead of following only macroeconomic parameters. And all the second underlying point in which guides our economic thinking and policy of Prime Minister Modi ji and our government is that if our economy is not what it was 20 years back or 15 years back, we are more integrated. Our interest lies in integration of our economy to global and regional supply chain. So we may have to rework some FTAs. We may have to look into multilateral trade agreement. We have to be geopolitically very much focused on watching Indian interest. We have the capacity to overcome global pressure, as we saw in the oil when we were stopped. We were said that we should not import oil from Russia and other thing, but we resisted that, and that strength is there in our government to tackle this.
Point very well taken. Thank you for that intervention. You to Mr. Rakesh Nangia for his intervention.
I'll avoid what has been said by my colleagues here. They've given a very big landscape. But what I want to add here is the thrust which the government must give in the budget is to promote the MSME sector as much as possible. Worldwide, if you see the whole topography of MSMEs, every country in the world, MSME sector play a much, much more important and bigger role as compared to the large industry or industries concerned. And the thrust of the government, it should be in a landscape, easy availability of credit. See, they give you they create a GDP, they give an employment, they give it, they bring a whole ecosystem of the economy in a much more sound basis. So one is an easy credit available. And I tell you one thing, I look after businesses so much of my client. The challenge of our colleagues mentioned of ease of doing business. You go to the ground root level, which the government must look into this. The challenges, the pain, you have it at the ground root level. Here, the government must actually pick up and see how and what more can be done to keep the business at ease of let the business see your tax collection is going up high, your personal income tax is going up high, your corporate tax is going up high, your GST is going up higher. So can't we make it more and more easy and self-compliant? This will actually divert so much of energy for the productive purpose. I can tell you one thing, this pain itself is a very big pain. So one of my requests to the government must look into this thing. Yes, everybody, MSME is a panacea for the big growth, basically. And the certain specific sectors, which are new age sectors, here the government must give a special thrust, whether it is EVV, whether it is semiconductors, whether it is green hydrogen or something like this. Here the government must give a thrust and maintain a lead also, and in global at the global scenario is concerned. So in manufacturing side, I have only one request to the government. We had a lower tax rate for the manufacturing, which was 15% and which was withdrawn last year. And this window came for 4 or 5 years during the COVID time. And COVID time, 2 years, nobody would have put up any industry, 2 or 3 years. And when you plan an industry, it takes a couple of years to put the industry. Your 4 or 5 years window was gone in no way. So we made a request to the government. I'm making it through your platform. This touches in manufacturing. Your 15% people could not took advantage the way they could have taken advantage because the window given was very small. This window should be extended, and it is worldwide. Every country provides incentive to certain sector of the industry. And why not we should do that? We did it. We did a very good beginning, actually. But my only request is SMEs, MSE sector should be looking for some incentive to be given. I'm not going into sector specific, including only saying one. The key and the panacea to all what we are talking is spending on infra, whatever type of infra may be there.
Thank you. That's the mantra of the government. $150 billion going into infra. And when we speak to people of the government, they say job creation is our priority. We want to generate jobs, So when people earn even little money, they spend on consumption and the economy kickstarts. So we want to put money in the hands of the common man, so he spends on all consumables, and the FMCG sector, other sectors do benefit. We are out of time. I would have liked to chat with you more, but on our sector specific show that we'll do in coming weeks, we will chat with you more on other sectors. I would like to thank Honorable Member of Parliament, Dr. Sasmit Patra from the BJD, Mr. Gopal Krishna Gawarji is national spokesperson for economic affairs for the Bharatiya Janata Party, also a chartered accountant. CA Rakesh Nangia, chairman of Nangia Anderson, thank you for making time on this very important issue of the Union Budget 2025-2026. Looking forward to see you on the next edition of this show with some other sectors. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.